Jackie, thank you very much for agreeing to be interviewed today.
My pleasure.
Now for the benefit of our audience, I'll just explain briefly about yourself. You've been in the media for quite some time and mainly in editing, and you've also done a bit of radio broadcasting too, I believe.
Yes, in fact I started off as a radio broadcaster back in the dark ages when they cut tape with razor blades.
Yes.
A long time ago. And and I sort of started editing, and then I was sort of always writing at the same time, and it was really difficult to get the editor off your shoulder and actually and move into writing. And I think everybody feels that. It's always difficult. But so now I'm doing that more than I've been doing that for about the last 10 years, just writing.
Terrific. And of course, your latest book is The Making of Julia Gillard.
Oh yes.
Yes, so you are an old hand, as they say, at non-fiction and creating a compelling story.
Well, I'd like to thank you, very, very kind of you. I'd like people to think that, yes. But I do feel that the worst thing you can do is bore your audience, and I think that is incredibly important.
No matter what the subject
No matter what the subject or whatever you're doing.
Yeah. So that is why Finch Publishing turned to you as our premier choice for one of our judges of our Finch Memoir Prize. And to that aim, I thought today we would talk a little bit about what strikes you when you pick up a manuscript. What are the things that you are looking for that makes that manuscript memorable and compelling? The elements that are there that make that manuscript compelling.
Well, it's kind of easy to answer that by saying it's got to be more than what everybody thinks it is. Now, to most people, a memoir, if you're writing a memoir, you're writing an account of a part of your life, not the whole life,
yes,
but a part of an episode in your life, or an incident or encounter or something that meant a great deal to you, and why. That's what it tends to be, but you can't just give a documentary account of it. And this is where it gets really tricky, because if it's a documentary account of it, you might as well do a piece for a magazine or something, and there has got to be something. The first thing you've got to do is find something in that story, and you're the only one who can do it, that says what makes this special? Why is this different from other things? It may mean the story itself. It might be the story itself may just be so bizarre that by telling it is enough. But for most of us who are not blessed with I don't know, or cursed with evil parents, or or
finding treasure,
or growing up in some exotic place from the age of 4 or something. I mean, most of us haven't had those experiences. So the thing you have to do is look at what you've got and see what it is that is going to make other people, and I emphasise other people, think that this is a really compelling story. That is the art of it. That is why there are so many memoirs, and that is why there are so few that are really good, I think, because you have got to get the kind of distancing on what could have been a very painful experience to enable you to say why it was painful and to explain to somebody else why it was painful. There is a line of poetry that I often quote, and I hope I've got it right. I haven't looked it up since I started quoting it, as you don't, but it's by the Australian poet Bruce Daw. And it's quite simple. What he says is, pain alone said nothing great. And it's really important, because it is not enough to have had the experience and to describe it. You have got to find a way of connecting that experience with other people's experience, or writing about it in such a way that you're carrying other people along with you. Now, it's the same sort of thing that it involves good storytelling, good characterisation, all the other things that make stories of any kind, or novels, or non-fiction, or whatever, of any kind, memorable. But you've got to have that hook.
I agree. I totally agree. And so it can be, so you could say the elements come down to not story subject, as well as characterisation, as well as use of language.
All those factors are important, but the hook is the big thing. Because I reckon that what you have to have as a writer is something that will make people who don't know you, this is the point, don't know you, don't know the story, don't think you're incredibly brave because you're telling the story of a nasty divorce, or, I don't know, disability or whatever it is, that isn't going to be enough to someone who's picking up a book in the bookshop and has never heard of you. Just
you need
nice
something
cover.
that resonates with the reader.
With the reader. And the way you do that is, there are several ways you do that. You either draw characters who are hilarious or are very interesting in lots of ways. But I think all the way through you've got to look at this and think, well, this is fine, but why am I reading this? You know, you have got to put yourself in the position of the reader and say, why am I reading? It is not easy. It's never easy.
No, of course not.
No, and that's why there, as I said, there are so few good memoirs.
Now, would you imagine that it would be a good idea to have, before you submit your manuscript to any prize or any other in publishing house, have several people read it? Or is that a bad thing?
It depends who the people are. It depends totally who the people are. I mean, you don't want your mum and your best friend. Your mum and your best friend are going to say, darling, it's lovely. That is gratifying, and it may be exactly what you want to hear, and it's very useful, but you have to use it judiciously, because what your mum and your best friend are saying is not going to be what the reader, who's never seen you before in their lives, are going to say. They're not going to care about your courage in telling a story. I mean, it may be at the back of their minds and admirable, but it's got to have something else. I think it's very, very difficult for any writer, and I know this myself, for any writer at all, to have the right kind of reader for a manuscript. As I said, it can't be your mum or your best friend or your enemy, which is even worse because that's destructive. Finding somebody who will give you honest criticism and let you know what you've written and where it doesn't work and why it doesn't work, as kindly as possible, but gives you that information, is one of the hardest things. It really is difficult. Yes. Yeah. If you have someone who doesn't know you is a good start. Someone who's you're getting this to read. Of course, getting people to do that is tricky. But I think someone who doesn't know you is a good start. So I would suggest, if you're going to find a good reader, it's got to be someone who doesn't know the story and who doesn't know you. Is a good start.
Okay, that's wonderful. Perhaps you could talk a little bit about a couple of memoirs that for you are standout examples of that category.
I read a lot of memoirs, and there are several that I think are good. They kind of change depending on which ones you've read most recently. But there are two standouts, and they're very different. One is Bad Blood by Lorna Sage. She's an English writer. She grew up in the 50s, and she was a bright academic kid in a non-academic family, a poor family in the north of England. It's good because she can look at her family. The way she writes about her family is fascinating. She's not paying out on them. She is telling you that they were not good and that things were pretty terrible, but she manages to tell what must be a painful story with just the right kind of detachment. So you keep reading. Hilary Mantel's Giving Up the Ghost is another one. Just thinking two of them. Romulus, My Father by Raymond Gator, which is of course Australian. That's got the same quality. And all three of them have the translucent quality where the narrator doesn't get in the way of the story.
That's interesting, that they can actually stand back.
They can stand back.
And the story sort of evolves from their point of view.
From their point of view. And they are in the story, but they're standing back at the same time, and they're being honest about the story. And it's a kind of a double vision, if you like, that a successful memoir does have to have. You've got it, and they're all good stories, and they're all very, very good writers.
That's true. And through that distance, you're able to get a very clear sense of the characters in the story.
Including the narrator.
I was about to say, through that distance, you get a sense of who the narrator,
hardest thing in the world.
How he reacts, yes.
Hardest thing in the world.
Yes.
And particularly, it means that you have to have a fair amount of self-knowledge to be able to do it. But not only just self-knowledge, but the ability to put that self-knowledge across and know who you were. And in a way, it's got to be based absolutely on fact. But I always think what's interesting about memoir is that you have to use some of the tools, if you like, some of the qualities that make successful fiction successful, including point of view, writing of character and tone, and literary quality. Everyone raves about literary quality. I would say that there is literary quality and literary quality. I think what you're aiming for in a memoir is transparency. You don't want fine, fussy writing. You don't want frills and laces to get in the way of the story that you're telling. So I would aim for clarity. It's also, it's harder to achieve than you think. And I think that is, and it's clarity based on fact, but what you've got to do is get the network of fact that you've got there and the story you're telling. But at every point of it you have to say, am I going in deep enough? Is this what I want? Is
this what I want to say?
Is this what I want? Is this what, not only is this what I want to say, but is this going to be interesting to the reader? It may be absolutely what you want to say, but the reader may be bored to souls.
Indeed. Now, Jackie, can you, when we're talking about manuscripts that have not been edited and you've seen them for the first time, you're not necessarily looking for what you would, or what the author would consider a completely polished, finished manuscript. There are other things in there that you're looking for.
Yes.
A voice,
a
spark,
a voice, a spark, honesty, ability to create character, self-knowledge coming through, which
Evidence
is incredibly, which is very engaging. And those qualities, I think, are more important than, quote, polished writing. People get hung up on literary quality. It is important. Obviously, you've got to get this stuff across. But if it's too long, if it's a bit clunky, if those qualities are there, those things are fixable.